Okay, so yeah, today's meeting is being recorded and will be posted online. And take it away, Nick.
Thanks. First, some administrative business. The next meeting we're planning on is 2 weeks from today, June 24th at the same time. As usual, any concerns or objections to that? All right, we will plan on that. On the agenda today, we have a mixture of basically issue triage for all the different repos. We don't have any presentations that I'm aware of. So my plan was just to kind of go down through the list and do what we can, see as far as we can get. We have some things for all the repos and specs in general. We have some resource timing issues, fetch issues, and some other miscellaneous ones as well. Why don't we just start going down the list? Yov, are you planning on trying to scribe for some of this?
Yeah.
Thank you. And I'm not sure, I believe at some point I'll probably be asking you about some of these issues, so I will try to hop in then. If anybody else is interested in providing backup, that would be appreciated as well. The minutes is linked to from the main agenda today. And I will actually just post that into our chat channel as well. Okay, let's start with the first one, which is in our web performance repo. So it's kind of our Uber repo that talks about all the things that we're doing. Issue number 36 is opened up by Marcos, and he's basically suggesting that we try to do a pull request template for that repo, I'm assuming, but probably for all of the different repos. He did actually have a suggested, I think, pull request template in HR time number 121. And you're welcome to take a look at the change there, the change list. It's basically just a single markdown file with some fill in the blank areas for people that want to open a pull request.
Maybe might be worthwhile to present.
Yeah, I can do that. Okay, so this is the suggested pull request template that we can obviously tweak to our needs, but kind of gives us a starting point. Basically fill out details, close any issues, mark whether there are any implementation commitments for this, ongoing tasks, and then how to title it as well. So basically kind of gives you a starting point if you are going to open up a pull request. Thoughts or opinions on things that are included there or other things that we should be adding to it? And I guess my assumption would be we would make this pull request template like we wanted and then basically copy it to all the other repos as well as the working template for us.
So maybe there could be a field for pull requests that are not implementation changes, because
I would assume that is editorial versus breaking change.
Yeah, so the suggestion is that the commits are squashed with one of the following as a message prefix, and maybe some of the sections above are not necessary if you are only doing an editorial or something like that. So we could probably make that a little bit clearer where, you know, implementation commitment is not necessary if you're just doing an editorial or something, or chore.
Yeah, I think that I think we should change the breaking change to just change, and then maybe have a different field for backward compat risky change. that will need further, like more justifications and more data behind it.
I see. That makes sense.
Sorry, just another question. What's the difference between chore and editorial?
Spec things, maybe? Like,
I understand editorial as touching the text, and chore as like, you know, either the
HTML
infrastructure
tidy
related to like the build system, or
Yeah.
like changing xrefs to be nicer and things like that. That's how I understand it. Maybe Karine has more insights into what Marcos had in mind, but
I mean, it doesn't matter as much what Marcos have in mind. I think it's important that it's clear to people that it's submitting a pull request what it actually means. So if it's something that's already well established, then it's okay to have them with that description. But otherwise, it might be nice to add a short description of what that means.
Let me capture some of these notes. So we are suggesting changing breaking change to just change. We're suggesting adding a new question about whether this would have substantial breaking changes to it, and to explain them. And maybe a description of what the difference between editorial, chore, change, breaking change would be.
yeah, basically each one of the PR types should have a short description saying what that type means.
Yeah, and maybe the PR type question should be the first one, right?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
If it's a chore, like you don't need to put anything about implementation. That doesn't matter, right?
Yeah, and noting that some of the subsequent questions may not apply to all types.
I have a question about the implementation commitment section. Mm-hmm. Is the implication that those must be available before opening a new pull request, or just that if they happen to be there, put them on?
I don't think that they need to be available before opening. I think that we need general consensus on changes. They seem like, I would assume that this is like for anything that's like chore or editorial, this is irrelevant. For changes, yeah, we want to know that implementations will follow, and definitely for breaking changes, which carry larger risk. But that is like typically something that's already covered in the you know, consensus model of the group. I think we like.
Sure, I was just curious if like that commitment typically is before landing the change, not because you might want to open a PR just for discussion's sake. And so I think it should be fine to leave those blank if they're not yet available. Mm-hmm. Just if they happen to be available to put it in. I just want to make it. I wouldn't want anyone to not open a PR and go file an issue first instead of having a discussion, or like maybe that's a good flow anyway, but.
Yep. And, you know, with the pseudo checkbox thing there too, it kind of gives you a hint that you may not need to do it initially, but hopefully by the time it lands.
Oh, I noticed that the first sentence says that this template is only for normative spec changes.
So what's the chore and editorial bit?
Yeah. So you're wrong about your definition of chore, because it couldn't be as.
Or yeah, or we could
I would say we just
we can change it to
like mark sections that are suggested to be filled out based on the type.
Yeah, otherwise just maybe yeah, it would be good to think how to not discourage people from submitting PRs with the new template, I guess.
Yeah, so needed to be a bit more welcoming. Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, it's not that it's that the tone is fine. It's just yeah, like Michael said, right? If I'm someone new here and I see the template, I think I have to fill all the fields. So maybe if it's not required for the PR, then it should be clear in the template that it's not required to have them all filled by the time you submit the PR.
So noting that not all fields of the template need to be 100% complete when opening, but required ones by the time it gets merged. Okay. It's a little bit of moving stuff around. Otherwise, I think it's a pretty good start for us. We can just see how it goes and go from there. Any other comments? I tried to capture what we said in statements here. Okay. Okay, thank you. So we'll go from there. My suggestion is once we get this one to our liking, get it merged in, we could duplicate that to the other repos from there. Next topic, I was going to, so this is about the app history API proposal. And we have discussed a little bit about how our own performance timeline works with different types of navigations, and app history is going to be introducing some new types of navigations, if you were, single page app style navigations. Yov, I know that you had talked back and forth with Dominic a little bit on this issue. Do you want to go over it a little bit and I'll scribe?
Sure. So essentially, Dominic outlined the way in which he feels we should expose soft navigation. So first of all, like maybe there's some like background missing on the app history API. Dominic Nicola and others are working on a new and improved history API that will enable better control over better and tighter control over what a navigation, like a soft navigation is, and will enable the browser to know when an intent for soft navigation is happening, rather than today where essentially developers intercept a random click event and then push state URL change, and anything in between can there is no clear way to say when the navigation started or ended. The app history API gives us a clear point in time in which a navigation started. It gives us indication on whether it is user initiated or not. And also includes like a promise-based API that essentially enables developers to resolve the navigation whenever they feel that the navigation is completed, which gives us a duration. Dominic's plan, and maybe I can best just present that. Present Dominic's plan, where he suggested, I think, a new performance entry. Yeah, so basically, same document navigation performance entry that looks oh, maybe I'm.
You were just at the right section. You were just at the right section. If you scroll down a little bit further.
Yeah.
Right there.
Okay. Yeah.
Same document navigation.
Yeah. So. Same document navigation entry, which essentially has a Boolean indicating whether it was successful or not. I think it also, the duration is a result, like a time diff between the time in which the navigation was, like the start time, and the time in which the promise was resolved. And this is like, it's interesting for from an API surface perspective, because it doesn't expose all the zero entries that, like, essentially for the regular performance navigation entry, there are a lot of points, like a lot of attributes there that are not relevant here for same document navigation. At the same time, for BF cache, we somewhat decided that it would be great if we had a single, essentially a single buffer for all navigation entries, which this, because this is like observing a completely separate navigation type, we'll need a separate observer, or an observer that observes multiple event types, which is something we are trying to discourage. So essentially, I think that it would be like good to get the group's opinion on what the right API shape for that would be. Do we want separate observers for separate navigation types, or do we want all of them to be piled up in the same array as they are now? One option that Dominic mentioned, that could be interesting, is to have a single keyword for observing all those different navigation entry types, but still have different entry types that are being accumulated. So we have performance navigation entry, and then same document navigation entry, and BF cache navigation entry, and they won't have zero sized zero valued attributes that are not meaningful. But still, we will get the same benefits of observing all of them in a single observer. And then we can have that observer be more or less specific for some of them as it goes through.
So for clarification, you're saying instead of observing navigation, you would observe all navigations or something, and it would give you all these different entry types?
Yes. That's the,
okay.
Yeah, or yeah, so that is different from what Dominic was suggesting, but maybe this is a better and more backward compatible way of tackling this. So you can observe navigation, which just gives you the traditional one, maybe you can observe multiple, like if you're just interested in BFCast navigation or just in same document navigation, you can observe them. And then we will have a keyword of all navigations that will give you all those types. Maybe that's the, just to ensure that from a backward compatibility perspective, I know that we've looked into extending the navigation array, and that is web compatible. But it is possible that some of that code assumes performance navigation timing entry and looks into attributes that will now be undefined if we will all of a sudden switch the entry from underneath existing code.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to folks? Any opinions for or against any of the proposed like API shapes?
So I don't know that I fully grok all of the nuance you just mentioned. I'll have to take a closer look. I just wanted to say that if the goal of throwing them all into a single bucket is only to know when is a good time to slice all entries and to say like, hey, there was a bit of a reset here or something changed, then that makes sense. But then visibility or idleness of sessions sometimes gets thrown into that conversation. And so would we want to expand to be abstract enough to handle in the future any of these types of other things that could slice? And if not, if it's very specifically narrowly focused on navigations because we want to know thing, the difference between BF cache and the app history is the URL changes. And so the place where you would want to record these things, there is a distinct property of one of them such that I would want to handle it custom anyway. Or maybe we want to like expose that for all navigation types or whatever it is. So anyway, those are just two things that add extra nuance there, I would say. Like it makes sense to me that I might want to listen for like any reason to reset or stop recording or whatever. But then if I specifically want to know where to route those or thing, then I would possibly want to handle app history different than BF cache.
Yeah. I think that slicing is not the reason here, because we talked about navigation IDs and essentially having some counter that for each future entry tells you which navigation ID it correlates with. And I would expect those, like each new navigation entry will have a new navigation ID that will enable you to do the slicing based on that. We haven't talked like, yeah, I haven't considered adding visibility to the, like, to add a new navigation ID. Maybe, maybe it makes sense, but I think it's like, it doesn't necessarily impact the API shape.
Okay, is it currently possible to get the URL in the case of an app history navigation where you might register a listener after the fact such that you have old buffered values only? Like I know that if you're currently listening, you can just read the URL, but is that something that we want to add to the entry? I didn't see it in the proposal.
I think we do, and that's a good point. I also realized, like while you were talking about URLs, I realized that I haven't seen URLs as part of the entry. So yeah, I think it makes sense for for the entry to say, like, provide that attribution because it's meaningful for developers that are collecting it. So I don't hear any strong opinions regarding the API shape, though.
for me, like getting notifications from a single observer or multiple different observers that I have to merge, but they have to all be handled slightly different anyway. Like it seems reasonable to do it either way, honestly.
Okay. Okay. That's fair. Okay, so maybe an action item to folks is to like hop over to the PR and see if this is something that, if you have strong opinions, please voice them on that PR. I think it.
Oh, one question. So is the idea to also surface this new entry type for back-forward navigations? Sorry if you said that already.
So I think back-forward navigations are definitely different than same document.
Right. So the entry name would be very wrong if the idea is to use them for back-forward navigations as well.
Yeah, the idea is not necessarily to use the same entry types for BF cache navigations. I originally thought for BF cache to reuse performance navigation timing entries, and then just add a new navigation type there. I don't like either we go with a general plan for all, like either we take that shape for same document navigations as well, or we take a different shape and also apply it to BF cache, in which case BF cache would be yet another separate navigation entry.
Yeah, because I'm just thinking this BF cache navigation seems a little similar to this one in that the information we would provide is perhaps quite similar. Whereas navigation timing, so most of the attributes are about the network, right?
Yeah. So the information this provides is a success Boolean. I think it, like Michael said, it should also provide the URL. That BF cache doesn't necessarily have to provide it. And the duration is defined based on the promise, where for BF cache, I'm, to be honest, not 100% sure what we should define there, because unload doesn't refire, and I don't know like what that would translate.
So there's a page show event, but I guess it will be different semantics anyway.
Yeah.
So I guess we need to answer that question though, right? Like, do we want the same type of entry for this app history versus BF cache? And there's other things that we haven't even talked about, like portal activation and things like that. Do we want to have like 10 different types of navigation entry types? Like that doesn't seem great.
Yeah.
So
that is exactly the question.
So beyond the potential downside of registering multiple observers, I think it really also comes down to, are we actually going to expose a navigation ID on all other entries? Because if you do, then you're going to be incorrect by default unless you actually register for all of them. Like you might not be able to match up to the right one. And so having them all share a single type will make you sort of correct by default in terms of matching them up. Like you might listen to app history navigations and portal activations, but forget BF cache, and now all of a sudden you haven't actually listened to all your entries are off. And so you'll have to keep up with the list of ever changing, even if you're not interested, because you'll be missing.
Yeah.
On the other hand, do we really need a navigation ID? Because we have times, and we could just line up according to the timeline.
Yeah, but it was pointed out in a past call that times can overlap in weird ways that like we want a more deterministic ID, which will also be
Yep.
more ergonomic. That's
right.
Yeah.
If at all possible, if it is implementable without implications, I think it would be interesting if the navigation ID was the index into the set, as opposed to having to go to a bunch of different observers and a bunch of lists and find the one that happens to match up. That would be one advantage. Like, it would be more correct by default.
so get entry by ID kind of API. That's the ID and type. Yeah, maybe.
What you said resonated with me, Michael, about making sure to future-proof this. If you wanted to be a good web developer, you would have to. You could not just start listening for the ones that you cared about, because if we ever added another type of navigation in the future, you would be missing that ID unless you updated your app to also capture, or to also listen for the other new feature type. Whereas if you just say, give me all of them, you would at least have access to an entry, and maybe it has just the type you don't really know about, but at least it's there in the array that you have knowledge of.
Yeah. Anyway, it seems worthwhile to continue to think about that and see how we can. Yeah, basically, there's a trade-off here between visibility and then trying to fit all the navigations into like a single entry type, or expose multiple entry types and then have developers switch on them, versus having completely separate observers that will require you to to know of all the things. And yeah, I'd appreciate all your thoughts on the PR, and we can then discuss it further there. And I think we need, eventually we'll need to align what we're doing with what the app history folks are doing.
Sounds great. Thank you, Yo, for leading us in that. I do have another one that is something that you are proposing of. This is resource timing. We're going to switch to resource timing. Resource timing number 273.
Oh, yeah, the early hints.
Exposing early hints, yeah.
Yeah, so this turned out less complex than I initially thought it would be. Let me share the tab. Essentially, the current proposal is to just use the initiator type and do something useful with it for a change, and just have the value of initiator type be early hint. So I think it's a very neat proposal compared to where I started here. And it also has a side effect of essentially being transparent from the resource timing spec perspective. It just needs that, from a spec perspective, after the fetch integration, the caller to fetch needs to pass along early hint as the initiator type, and that will just be reported. I think it's a pretty neat solution to that particular problem. The background here is that the Chrome loading team is starting to play around with an early hints origin trial. And one of the partners wanted, one of the requirements is to be able to measure whether or not early hints were actually triggered. So having that value in resource timing is essential for the origin trial. That seems like essentially it's like I said, it doesn't involve a spec change here. It's just a spec change on the early hints part. So I think that if the origin trial is successful and Chrome decides to implement and ship early hints, I think that this is like the right way to do that in terms of reporting. So I'm basically curious about any thoughts on that front in terms of
and there's no case where other information from the initiator type would be useful, that setting it to early hints. Like, are we losing out from other potential information from initiator type if we set it to early hints instead?
So initiator type at the moment is not super useful, at least in my opinion. For preloads, the initiator type is link. For all of them, regardless of what is that preload and what's what is its destination. So I think losing and to be honest, I'm not sure what is currently being reported for header-based preloads. It may be interesting to check, but yeah, I don't think there's any information loss from early hint unless we will start getting multiple, an early hint preload versus an early hint something else that I don't think is in the plans.
Okay, that makes sense.
Cool.
Hey, Yoav. So I think when I was looking at this, the concern I had was early hints is going, it's a Chrome only feature, right? And then then exposing something only works, only going to be existing Chrome sounds now the right solution to me, or am I missing something?
So early hints right now is a no browser feature. It is, so there's an ITF standard. There is no web spec for that at the moment, but I know that the Chrome loading team is planning to work on one. Basically, it needs some fetch integration to understand how it interacts with CSP and other things. Right now, it's in an origin trial. I think the origin trial is out. So this is being experimented. It's not yet web exposed. When it will be web exposed, I think that the current piping of resource timing aligns well with the fact that the caller tells the caller passes along to the algorithm what the initiator type is. So yeah, essentially this doesn't require any real changes on the resource timing front. It's just changes on the caller to the fetch spec that will initiate the early hint. Does that answer your question, or did I misunderstand?
Yeah, I think as long as it's not like really changing the resource timing, I'd be fine. Although I don't have a clear picture of how the color hints the early hint thing. But I guess I can look to that after.
Cool. I can, yeah, let me. Yeah, it's essentially an ITF proposal that is, yeah, suggested as a replacement for, for a replacement or a supplemental feature for like H2 push. It covers some of the same use cases. It was actually driven by a colleague of Patrick Hammond here from Fastly. And basically the Chrome loading team is playing around with that to see what it gives. And the hope is that, you know, the experiment and this reporting of when early hints were triggered or not would enable various partners to report back with you know, benefits in terms of performance and otherwise.
Okay, yeah, that sounds better. Thanks.
Cool. Cool.
Sounds good. So the call to action there is to provide feedback into that particular app history. Well, I guess, so that pull request is merged.
Which one?
The app history pull 125.
Oh, the app history one. Yeah, it's.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I stepped back. Okay, so this particular issue, the actual action is no issue in it, because for us, into our specs, right?
Yeah, so I think the action item here is that I can close this issue because it will just fall out of the. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I can just do that now.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I guess that does bring me back to the last discussion around app history.
Yeah.
We were going to provide feedback about the API shape and stuff, but looking at it, that merge request is merged. Do we have another forum where we want to just, like, should we open a new issue in our repos or in the app history repo?
Yeah, it may make sense to open a new issue on navigation timing maybe, or on performance timeline to see how we can coalesce all those different navigation types and have the discussion there. It may be the best, the best way to do that.
Okay, I'll keep that in the notes and send that to me.
Cool.
Okay, thank you. Next small issue, let's see, we have about 10 minutes left. Next small issue is in resource timing, issue number 274. This is opened by Anne. Just use byte string for next hop protocol as part of the, I guess, IDL in the spec. I don't really understand what the proposed change would do, so I'm not sure if anybody else does here.
I don't have any extra context. Sorry.
He says then you can avoid the isomorphic decode step.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so in our spec, we have the next hop protocol getter steps are to isomorphic decode this timing info's final connection, timing info's yada yada. And I guess my guess is that changing the IDL to a byte string just avoids that word or those few words in the spec. Because that's the only point in the spec that we actually talk about. Isomorphic decode.
Yeah, so this is essentially like a spec cleanup.
Spec chore thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it, yeah, I can take an action item to look at that and see what that actually means.
Okay. Thanks, Yov.
And 275 looks similar, I guess.
Yeah. Issue 275 for resource timing is there's no mention. Here, I can just share my screen too, because why not? No mention to WebIDL in conformance section. Something I guess we had made a change a long time ago, pulled out the WebIDL for IDL fragments. I'm a little lost on this whole issue, to be honest.
Okay, Marcos seems to have strong opinions on why we shouldn't have, yeah, like why we shouldn't mention WebIDL for IDL fragments. I can talk to Marcus and see what, yeah, again, like I can take an AI to Marcus and see.
Okay. And my reading of that is saying that change that we did back then is good, and we don't want to undo that change, is what Marcus is suggesting. Okay. Sounds good. All right. Let's see. Okay, so the next one is in the fetch spec. We have TAO check and child frame navigations. Opened by Zeta function on April 23rd. I don't believe we've talked about this yet in these meetings, although I know some of
I don't think we have.
those on the call have commented there, so I'm not sure if Nicholas or Yov want to give a brief update on it.
Sorry, which issue?
Oh, sorry. Issue fetch 1221. Posted it in comments. I will share my screen so everybody can see the same thing.
Yeah, apologies, but I don't.
Yeah, I think this is about tau being improperly specified for navigation timing and for iframe resources because they go through a different navigation path in the fetch spec than the other resources, because they start in as a navigation, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I think we agree what the thing needs to do. We just need to specify it. Like we need to figure out how to specify it, right? Like it shouldn't have a different behavior than if it was say, an image, basically it needs to go through all the redirect hoops and check tau in each step. But unfortunately, we don't get that for free in the fetch stack because iframes follow a different kind of fetch. Basically, the mode is different. So I do believe this is from when we moved the tau check into fetch. And we haven't fixed it.
Yeah, that makes sense. So yeah, for navigation timing, it doesn't matter because we drop the tau check entirely. But when we're exposing iframes to the parent, it does. That makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and hopefully the implementers are implementing it similar to how Chrome is doing it, which is not considering it a special case, which in terms of the implementation does mean to consider it a special case, right? Because iframes are loaded differently. But
yeah, but we don't, like, it's not specified and most probably not tested. I don't think we have tau checks for iframes, but maybe we can.
Yeah, that's a good point, and maybe that should be a first step, just to see how much of a priority this is. If browser vendors don't align in the behavior, then this is a higher priority. If they all align, then it's more of a spec chore. Well, not chore. Overloaded word. Sorry.
No, it's like it's a change, but it's not a breaking change. Yeah, but I agree that if we are all aligned, that would significantly reduce the urgency. Yeah, I don't know where that, like, I think that the tau tests are not using iframes. No, they're using syncxhr for some reason. And it's true that, yeah, as part of the, like, there's an ongoing effort to improve the tests. I think that as a part of it, we wanted to also expand the test surface to also cover different types of resources, because yeah, images, like at least in Chromium, images and XHR are different types of loaders, and iframes are definitely a very different beast. So yeah, I think the first step is probably to extend the tests to also cover iframes, and then we can see how big and how bad of a problem this currently is.
Any volunteers to work on tests? Okay, I will volunteer.
There's someone on our team, right, that's working on tests?
Yeah, Tom is working on tests. Like, for what it's worth, I think it will be really easy to add those tests, because there's, let me present for a second.
So whenever somebody says, I think it will be easy, if we can assign it to them for them to do.
I think it would be
prove
easy
that it's going to be
someone.
easy by implementing them.
It would be easy for someone to. So there's like the new test frameworks for like essentially all the old tau tests are now this list of tests, and they're using syncxhr to check all those invariants. I think that testing the iframe case would just mean adding an array here of different loading functions, and then iterating over this, like, that array with those test cases. And as far as I, like, the results should be the same. So it like, yeah. So.
Sorry, Nicholas, were you saying that somebody on your team is actively working on test refactoring here, that this would fall to them, or do we want somebody else in this working group to work on it?
So they are working on refactoring. Yeah, we can definitely ask and see if they're interested in also expanding test coverage on this particular front. And see.
Yeah. Why don't you do that? And if it's not going to be covered or just not in scope soon, then somebody else can tackle just adding this particular test now. So is it okay if I give either Nicholas or Yov an action item to figure that out and get back to us on who should?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna send it to me.
Too. Okay, it is 2:01. Thank you everybody for whatever time it is in your time zone, 01 after the hour. Thank you everybody for joining today. We appreciate it. We'll post the meeting notes and video later since we recorded today, and we'll see you in 2 weeks.
Thanks all.